I am more a practitioner. As Vanna was talking about, that we need more, how many of us are really working at the ground level. So my own work of more than 25 years, I would like to share some narratives, some stories, which is linking to the entire issue of access to health, and how I visualize the entire aspect of looking at discrimination based on caste, and how it intersects with other larger issues of discrimination in a country like India, where we have almost more than 18 million people who are suffering based on their caste identity. And I was introduced as one of the person from that community. For me, I would say that looking maternal health or health aspect or access to health with the right framework somewhere excludes us from the entire debate of looking at the social justice. As what I was thinking about is, I have been practicing for such a long time and taking up issues of discrimination and violence in the courts, at the police stations, with the health practitioners, and also with the community. And I would say that somewhere what I could say is the missing part is looking at with the true prisms of rights and social justice. And most of the times, the movement where I come from, the Dalit rights movement, we have been able to work on the aspect of rights and social justice, but we don't take rights and social justice together. So somewhere what it takes away the entire aspect of looking at the larger framework of caste-based inequality. There was a presentation yesterday about role of NGOs and civil society in Kerala, and how they have been appropriated by the government. I think that is a reality which one has to accept, but it also means that they are very good and genuine organizations which work on the issue of caste-based discrimination. And unfortunately, these organizations are led by people from those communities. So somewhere I would say that even our civil society is so much marginalized, in that sense that we identify one particular movement with a Dalit rights movement, and then we don't want to look into the other aspect of what is the human rights framework which has been developing in a social justice movement in India, and how a movement of 18 million people is being 180 million people being sidelined in that sense, and where the identity politics come up, and then issues like access to health somewhere are being kept at a very on the periphery. It's never been given a core attention as a dialogue or a debate in a Dalit rights movement. So when we see the constitution, where we talk about equality, we talk about freedom, we talk about right to life, and somewhere I think health intersects with all these rights. So if we don't have if there is no equality, you will not get good access to health. If you don't have the freedom, even then also there is, and the life part. And I think those things are so important, because when you see how does the caste-based society manifest itself is where is the location of the community. And I work with more in the rural area. So when I see a village, I would say that majority of the people who are discriminated based on caste are living on the periphery. So that is very much important, because that also shows the extent of exclusion, the extent of discrimination, preferential treatment, and segregation. I think segregation is the most important aspect when you talk about access to health, because where is the location of the primary health centers in any village or any settings? I think that's very important. Like the historicity of thousands of years of caste-based discrimination has not opened the eyes of our government to say that those people who have been marginalized for such a long time, why their entire right is being excluded, because their location is also away from the basic amenities or access to those aspects. So when you're talking about primary health centers, one is would I be able to see how the community live with that fear of, will I be able to access the support of a medical practitioner, because will I not be rejected in that hospital or in that clinic just because of my caste identity? I think this is something we have to think upon. And caste itself as Vanda was also talking about so much about right to food, and I would say that it is something also linked to like how do I survive in such a society where every time my identity has been questioned and I've been asked again and again, what is your caste, and if you are from the lowest caste, do you have to live and survive as a human being? I think, see, this is so important because we are living in 21st century and there are still age-old practices still going on in a country like India. We have people who are forced into manual scavenging, where people still clean human excrement with bare hands, and 95% of them are women from the community, which is called as Valmikis, or there are different names there in the country. But I would say that these women, one is the entire aspect which is caste, and then the gender, and the entire aspect of lens of being coming from a lowest community and poor. It does take away the right to even question about whether they can say that no, I don't want to do this dirty practice because my health is getting affected. And so then we have to look with that lens of, okay, if she is doing this dirty work, are there other aspect of water and basic amenities provided to somebody who is forced into this practice? And again, there is a huge gap, because we all know that most of these people who are into this kind of work, they live on bare minimum. They have then the entire question of minimum wage rate comes up. So all these are interrelated to the entire aspect of health. So I would say that when you're talking about caste discrimination, we are not just focusing on the physical part of the health aspect, but we are talking about the traumatic, the social aspects of somebody who is suffering for such a long time. And the suffering starts from the school. So we are talking about right to food, and we are talking about children to be given food in the midday meal. And we all know that children from this community, from the Dalit community, are seated separately. Yeah. So, okay, and then the quality of food does matter. Right. So then the first question is, okay, if you are a Dalit or you come from a lowest caste, you sit separately from the other children. So what kind of suffering that person, the student, that child goes through? Nobody talks about that. Okay, we say that, okay, one has to have good food. That is important. But how you are treated as a person in these kind of places, and it starts from the schools. And I think our movements who are focusing on caste, I think somewhere we have been able to challenge the system. We are talking about elimination of caste-based discrimination, and I would say that my work and my own life has been into this work for last 25 years, and where we have taken this issue at the UN level, at the United Nations, and where the country itself the government itself is questioning us to say that, does caste exist in a country like India? And we all know that everybody in India wants to know which caste do we belong to, whether we are human rights practitioners also, or we are academicians also, or whichever field we are, we still want to know what is our caste, and we still want to know how that person who sits next to me, or who studies with me, who works with me, and then that creates a kind of a suffering, because your identity politics is now the entire issue of India. That the root cause of this problem of questioning the caste system is basically our mindsets have not changed. Our educational institutions have not been able to see caste as something which is not able to make India a better country, a better society. So then, if this is the situation, and we all know that when we're talking about access to health, we are talking about students who commit suicides in the colleges, and I don't want to give the stories, because we all know who I am talking about. There are students who have been mistreated because of their caste identity. So there is a large arena in the educational institution which is missing is the counseling part, which is talking about the trauma counseling, or the situation of a student saying that, okay, I am suffering because of discrimination, but is there a help there provided to me where I can access to it, and then live my life with dignity and also pursue my studies? And I think that is somewhere the entire access to health is missing for these kind of students who are into the higher education institutions. Apart from I would say that I had taken up a campaign to end violence against women in Gujarat, and in 2014 and 15, and I was moving in the villages, and I was just thinking about is this what I come from Gujarat, right? So is this what is a development model in terms of how do we talk about access to health? Because I met a girl who comes from the lowest caste, and she was on the bed, like she was right. It was so much visible that she was sleeping on a cot right outside her house, and it is just few feet away was the public health system, and she was not able to access it for last 7 years. So can you believe that? Like, just because she comes from the lowest caste. And then because I just want to bring the entire lens of gender and the class part of it, because how that girl was suffering for, like, she was just 22 years old, and ultimately what it led me to decide was to take her from there and bring her to the big city, right? And she had to travel for 4 hours to get access to good health system. Now this is the state of a situation in a state like in Gujarat. There was another woman whom I met was she was, because I'm not a health expert, so I would just say that there was something with her body where she had a lot of water in her body. I don't know what's the disease. Is it like you see that it's swollen, and she was also suffering, and I was just wondering why she was suffering, why she is not being taken to the hospital. And ultimately we have to again take her to 3 hours. We traveled for 3 hours and brought her to the city Ahmedabad. So these are the examples which I want to say that access to health is, as an indicator, has to be taken up very seriously. And somewhere our own movements are not able to see the reality of somebody who is suffering and with this identity politics. And somewhere we negate the fact that so many people are being living a life of deprivation of their basic rights. Now, my own journey when I was in my 22, 23 years old, and I could see that if somebody's rights is violated, like a man who was brought into the police custody and with a false case on him, a man from the Dalit community, beaten up badly by the police, right? And then comes the issue of his treatment. Who will provide him the treatment? Because ultimately the protectors of law had literally tortured this man, yeah, and he was beaten in his private parts. So when he was taken to the community health center, the first question comes that it's a medical legal case, right? So would that person be admitted? Because it's again the police would be questioned. So ultimately he was not taken as an Indo patient, and then he was given some penicillin injections and all that, and then next day we saw his dead body hanging in his house, right? Now the point is, where do we talk about access to health? With this man, he's been killed. He's been killed by the police, right? He become a target of hate crime. Yeah, we know what happens in the US or in South Africa. We know it. So how do we justify that the act of the protectors of law and saying that they violated the right of this man, a poor man who comes from this community? So this is something which I want to put. Then when I visited those families who have been internally displaced and because of mass attack on them, or there has been a murder of a youth in the village, and then how they move out of that entire setting because they want to get away from a situation of becoming more vulnerable to violence and discrimination. But what happens to a situation where these families then they move out to a setting which is making them more vulnerable because they don't have any kind of support, whether it is economic, it's social, and also medical. So there are situations where when you see that internally displaced communities living a life of lesser than humans, and then where there have been deliveries of women who are pregnant in the open, and the collector's office is just a few blocks away. So what do you do with that? What do you talk about? What do you say when you so all their rights are being violated. But the point is that will they be able to understand that their rights are being violated? Because when you get aware, you get educated, then you understand that your mind start working and saying that, okay, this right is being violated, right? And then I start questioning the system. But when I lack those education, I lack those kind of awareness. So what happens to that community? Where does that community goes? And I think we have to look into our own documents, our own research. Where are we? What kind of research are we doing? Are we doing this kind of research where we are literally going into the interior areas of different parts of the country and looking at the true scenario? Because it's not coming out. Most of the time, the stories which I have narrated might have not been come in the books also, because ultimately, who develops the design of research? Where does the research fit into looking at the prism of caste, right? Or inequity with a different lens of caste, class, gender, religion, right? So these all things have to be taken up when we are talking about making a movement-based work. I've been part of several campaigns in India, and we were just thinking about that most of our energy went into looking at implementation of laws, right? So implementation of laws is very important, but implementation of laws, does it also includes access to health? Because somewhere I would say that when it is Prevention of Atrocity Act, or we are talking about abolishing the prevalence of manual scavenging, those kind of practices, it's missing somewhere, I think. So because the laws itself makes the community more looked up as more lesser human, because then they say, okay, they are basically fighting for rights to get compensation. But I think somewhere the missing part in this entire aspect is the medical treatment and the approach. And I would say that when I have handled cases of gang rape and those kind of cases of extreme forms of violence, why one has to bring that woman survivor of sexual violence to travel 3-4 hours to just get a treatment, so what is the present system, the medical system? Is it really helping the most deprived people and those whose rights have been violated? It's not happening. So we have to understand that the situation is, the current scenario is that there is technological advancement. There has been a lot of still we say that the roads are becoming much more better, the transport is becoming much better, but the mindset is not changed. And I think so then the entire question comes at what is the role of the educational institutions? How are they really making the students sensitive? Are the medical practitioners okay, they are specialized in a particular profession, but then are they also have that human approach? If they do have, then why will they discriminate? Why will they discriminate against somebody just because of that person's caste, right? I'm not talking about the entire thing of religion, but we do know that, because my entire presentation is on caste. But we have to understand that somewhere the core essence of access to health is humanity, and somewhere this humanity is somewhere being reduced, and we are just looking at the tip of the iceberg. We are talking about this issue, that issue, but ultimately we are not talking about social transformation. And I think even movements have to be look into that, because as a woman and into the Dalit rights movement, I also face challenges being a woman, right? And we all know what would have been in South Africa or in US or somewhere. We are talking about black women and all, but the point is that the lens of caste have to be broken into several segments of religion, gender, subcaste, right? Because it is linked to mobility, it's linked to employment, it is linked to education, and then only we can understand that who is the most vulnerable, and that vulnerable needs more resources, more, and then it is linked to policy level changes. And somewhere women from the community, from the community who are being discriminated based on caste, they are not seen as a special social category. So either they are put with the women from general women, or they are put with the men in the community. but they need a specific way of being identified, thank you, by the as a special category, because it is so important, because then the framework of everything changes. So the design of the research will also change, right? And then if the research design change, then practitioners like us would also be involved in doing research. I've been involved in doing research on untouchability, on discrimination in Gujarat, and we did four fantastic study. One on a very big study on 1,589 villages on 98 forms of discrimination based on caste. Then I realized, okay, the entire missing part is the gender. So then we did a study on women's access to maternal health. We did one study on women's participation in village councils. So these kind of things is very important, because ultimately we want to have a better society. So most of the movements and the campaigns which are being going on, we have to see that we should have a common vision, and that common vision is missing. So the entire rootedness of a historical a reality of discrimination is not being challenged, and so we are not so powerful like the government, and we all know what India is today. So we all know that if we all have worked together as a collective, as a strong mass movement, where we say that, okay, I'm part of this campaign or this movement, but ultimately we are all there to bring a social change, and that is missing in a country like India. And I think this is what I would like to say in my presentation, is that there is a lot of work to be done on research. There is a lot of work to be done based on action-based research, which leads to action, and also organizing the community, and where people with like-minded approach and like-mindedness should come together, whichever field they are, because ultimately we need genuinity even in the human rights framework, and which will help us to deliver the health services in a better way, where we build a society where people who come together do not want to see each other from which religion or which caste or which gender we come from, but we come together to challenge a system which basically has created more and more inequities. And I think this is what is important and crucial in the current framework, and which can also make us help those who are been suffering for such a long time. And the suffering which that person is, I just want to end with, because you know what happened in Gujarat. There was this 1 and a half year back, there were 4 boys who were flogged by the cow vigilante groups in the Una. And I was just talking, like before coming here, I was talking with the father of the person who registered the complaint. There was a movement which is happening in Gujarat. But the point was, this father was saying, there were people who used us, right, for their own political interests, but ultimately our suffering is still there, because there is no justice for us. And the other thing is the entire aspect of healing. Like when you are working with people surviving from violence and discrimination, what they need is emotional and moral support. And I think that is something which is missing. And access to health can only be important if how that person is given a hand, because even the touch of that person is seen as defile in India. So many people, they suffer with that pain of being not recognized as human. Thank you so much.